At last year's AES, Gear Club was honored to have Dave Hewitt as our guest. Dave is recognized as a true pioneer and has earned multiple awards along the way, including Grammys, Emmys, and TEC Awards. Dave was the first to put a world-class recording studio on wheels as the director of remote services for New York's legendary Record Plant Studios. Over his 40-plus year career, Dave has recorded and broadcast thousands of live events, from 1973's Watkins Glen Summer Jam to Live Aid to the Academy Awards. In fact, Dave has recorded shows by every major act that toured the U.S. for 40 years. The Stones, Springsteen, Muddy Waters, Neil Young, the Three Tenors, and the Eagles, to name a few. It takes special skill, attitude, and discipline to succeed in mission-critical situations. And as you'll hear, Dave has all these in spades.
So, you guys knew each other from the record plant?
Well, no.
No?
Yes. I mean...
Was that a yes or a no?
Part of growing up at the record plant is literally... You know, you spend a week in the shop, and then you spend a week on the truck, and these guys show you.
You were on the truck?
Well, for a little bit. I mean, everybody went through it, and
everybody got beat up.
Everybody got beat up, I got beat up, but then years later, it came full circle that Hands Across America, down in the Superdome down in New Orleans, when the Hooters opened up for Huey Lewis.
Right.
They flew me down to do the sound. So then I was actually engineering, which was a total...
In the truck?
Yeah, I recorded that show.
Yeah,
where was he?
Were you there? You were there.
Yeah, I was there.
Everybody was there.
Yeah, because there were other acts. You know,
yeah,
the
Hooters paid for me, flew me down so I could do their feed. Because I knew the record, because I recorded some of the record.
Right.
And then I might have done... The Hooters maybe did Live Aid too, and I remember...
Yes.
And it was like a noon thing, and I drove out to East Rutherford for noon, and then was home in time to have like barbecue with my parents in Brooklyn. So I was back by like 2:30. They had a half an hour set, and then I was
Would you drive the truck?
I drive the truck.
You know, the way I ran that operation at Record Plant, when I got there, I hired that truck, and it was Wally Heider's truck.
The white truck.
Yeah. You know, they leased it for a while.
Right.
But there was no... these all turn into stories if you want. Do you want to include any of that?
No, absolutely.
Yeah, this is everything. This is all we talk about.
Because there's a whole litany of things.
Yeah, do it.
Going to that, too.
But so talk about the white truck, when they hired you.
Okay. Well, that was a Wally Heider truck. Wally, which a lot of people don't know anymore, he really started cranking out the first real remote trucks out in
L.A.
Starting in San Francisco.
Oh, right. Sorry.
So he had, it was his truck, and I don't know the exact history of that truck. I know that the DiMedio console that was in there was they had built for the Johnny Cash television show in 1965.
Oh, that's amazing.
And, at some point that show ended, and, DiMedio or Wally, who owned it, put it in the truck somewhere along the line. And the truck shows up at Record Plant, and they used it to record a concert for Bangladesh.
Right.
That
was at the Garden?
Yeah. Which was a big deal at the time. And that became a massively popular album. And I bought it.
I bought it.
I bought it.
Yeah. I was engineering down in Philadelphia at Regent Sound.
That's where you started engineering?
Yeah. Wow. And that had been Cameo Parkway Studios.
Oh, wow.
And then they went bankrupt, and Bob Lifton, who owned Regent in New York, had Philadelphia connections. He put a bunch of gear in there, turned it into Regent Philadelphia. I had a girlfriend. It was a folksinger that introduced me to them. At the time, I was still in the sports car business. I used to build race cars and shit like that.
No kidding, really?
My first career was a bonehead wrench twister, and
good name for a band.
Yeah, and I gradually became involved in that stuff. But the real story here is that we had to do a TV pilot at the Academy of Music down there that was It had a small orchestra and a band and, a bunch of singers and stuff. And there's no way that we could cart stuff in there and do that. It was just too big. And because of that album, I knew that Record Plant had this remote truck. And I called him up, managed to get Chris Stone, the founder, on the phone,
Right.
Which you could do in those days. Yeah. And, I explained what we needed to do. And if you know anything about Chris Stone, it's, oh, yeah, sure, absolutely. They'll be right down there. They'll take care of everything, yada, yada, yada. And you sort of go, yeah, right. But they did. They sent down Carmine Rubino, Frank Hubeck, a bunch of those guys. And they just jumped in, set it up, interfaced with the film crew, interfaced with the union guys, the PA guys, all this crazy shit that goes on that you never do in the studio. I'd never seen this.
Right.
I had no idea, how complicated a live show was. And, they just nailed it. There were problems, shit breaking, stuff, all kinds of things crashing. They just went right through it. The end of the show, here's a bunch of 14-inch reels of 2-inch tape.
Right.
Goodbye. They drive off, and I'm going, what just happened? This is amazing. It's like doing a studio session at 10 times speed.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm just absolutely astounded. I actually went out to California. They were Record Plant was building a new studio in Sausalito,
Right.
San Francisco, and that was that was the place to be. But it wasn't done yet. I got out there, and they weren't even open yet. And Gary Kellgren was out there, the other Record Plant partner. And so, you're not going to get anything there. I drove down to L.A. I talked to Chris Stone again, and
So Roy was not involved yet?
No, Roy bought New York.
New York.
Yeah, New York was the first Record Plant.
But he was
not partners with Chris Stone
He
and
wasn't.
Gary Keller,
No,
right?
They were there first.
Chris and Gary founded Record Plant in 1969.
Got it.
They hired Roy, maybe I'm not sure of the year. Very soon after they founded it, they stole Roy from A&R and Shelley and all that kind of thing. And then when Chris and Gary, Chris being the wheeler dealer, he sold New York and used that money to build L.A. and then to build Sausalito and all that stuff. Very successful. And
Saw the writing on the wall. Like,
yeah.
Music business was moving.
Well, Chris Stone, absolute genius. I mean, it just beyond belief. So Roy got financing and got a partner and bought New York. And I didn't know any of this shit. This is all the politics back behind the scenes. I thought they were all the same.
Right, right.
So I come back, couldn't get anywhere with that. I came back east. I still living in Pennsylvania. I drive up to New York and walk in the door, looking to see if I can get hired there, as studio guy. I run into Frank Hubeck, who's the guy running the remote truck. And I mean, he literally, because he knew me from the gig we did, and he knew that we had Ampex MM1000s at Regent like they had on the truck. I mean, he literally grabs me by the shirt and says, "You're coming with me." Wow. And I knew how to drive trucks from the military, and we immediately take off. And this is January, and we drive to.
Now, where's your car at this point? You at a meter?
My girlfriend came up with me. So
okay, she drove the car.
Yeah, she took it off. But I got no clothes. I got nothing. And just off we go. It's January. We go to fucking Buffalo, New York, right on the lake. It's snowing.
Wow.
It's absolutely crazy. But it was the Mahavishnu Orchestra.
Nice. Okay.
With John McLaughlin, at top of their game. And they had some semi-local act opening for them called Aerosmith. And
so good.
We actually didn't record them. But this is the beginning. I knew nothing about this either. This was actually the first of the King Biscuit Flower Hour shows.
Yeah. Great.
The very, very first one. So we do that.
So it was live for radio.
Yeah, they would post it. They would take it back and mix it. They would make these radio shows with 2 or 3 acts on them, and it became a huge success, huge climb. Yeah. And then I got to jump in the truck and drive straight to Boston in the snow
for
the Boston Orchestra, the Pops. In the Symphony Hall there, and we got to take the console and the machine out of the truck and take it upstairs because that's where the RCA guys want it.
Fucking wait! How many crew? How many crew?
There's like, me and Frank and maybe one other guy, but they got a bunch of union guys.
Right. So the union guys are doing
You
it.
got to pull all the cables for the setup.
Everything. Pull all this shit out of the truck, take it upstairs, record this. One of the best symphony orchestras on the planet, which I'd never done.
Right.
I'd done jazz and rock, and I'm standing out there putting up mics while these guys are playing around me. I'm standing in the middle of the orchestra just going, holy shit, this is amazing. Wow. Where do you get to do that? So we finished that. Go down to load the shit on the truck because we got to go to New York. The lift gate is dead. The battery is dead. We got a 500-pound Ampex 1000. We got a Domidio console that's got to go up. Frank, in his resourcefulness, had noticed that down the street there's a construction crew building a hotel or some goddamn thing. He goes down and gives one of these guys $100 to bring the forklift down.
Of course.
And forklift this stuff back into the truck, and I jump in, and we drive straight back to New York. We're going to do Bruce Springsteen at Max's Kansas City.
Jeez.
He had just finished he'd already had his first album out.
Right.
But, he was nowhere near a hit. He didn't even own a car. He'd take the bus from New Jersey to New York to do Max's Kansas City, where he is opening for Biff Rose, if you remember Biff, the folk singer. And we do a couple of those things. And Mahavishnu and Bruce, and then one other act that we didn't do, become the first King Biscuit Flower Hour show. All kinds of crazy.
You still have those recordings?
Oh no. We didn't even have a cassette machine then.
Right.
If and there was no room for a 2-track. You did the multis,
and that was
they did the post. Right. But you could get this stuff online.
Yeah,
King Biscuit.
Yeah, Steve Rosenthal did a lot of those transfers.
That's right. Yeah,
Steve from the Magic Shop did.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there's a wealth of that, and they turned into one of our biggest clients.
I remember listening to those shows as a kid. That was like the fucking highlight of. I remember Hall & Oates,
all through the 70s.
Osbourne,
yeah,
like just so many. Tom Petty.
So did you go around and do all those shows?
A whole bunch of them. Right. Yeah, they did. And people have no idea. Kids these days, they have no idea that that back then you didn't have any other way of doing it. You listened to the radio, you played your vinyl.
Yeah. Right.
Those were the only 2 sources.
Right.
And so the King Biscuit was a big deal.
A big deal.
And they were very successful. They made a ton of money.
Right.
And they all drove Ferraris. And
there you go.
We did them all the way out to the end.
So it sounds like just based on this first run, from an orchestra to the Mahavishnu to a crazy rock club. Has that been the way it's always been, that every gig is completely different?
Yeah.
Right.
Well over 4,000 remotes in the time that I was there, probably closer to 5,000. Just go down the list of that first year of 1973, the first year it was there, and it was insane. We did well over 50 individual remotes in that one year, and it was everything from that gig. That was the second year that the Newport Jazz Festival moved to New York, and and it was in all these theaters around town, and we were in there doing Ray Charles and all these great jazz players and singers and orchestras and drama. We did King Lear in Central Park.
Wow.
We did. just this unbelievable variety of shows that you would, again, you're never going to get that in a studio.
Right.
You can't specialize like that, as you guys know.
Right.
Plus the fact that you book these projects that go on for an extended period of time.
Right.
Whereas the remotes are
You got to get it.
bam, 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 bam. And if you're going to have a successful business model, you can't just do rock.
Right.
You got to do everything.
Right.
And
But you guys also went on tour with certain artists, right? You would do like 5 or 6 days, right, and follow them around for impending live records, correct?
if they had the money, it was an accidental business for Record Plant New York. They didn't intend for that to be a complete business. And then when Chris and Gary moved out west, they took Tom Fly with them, who was the guy that was running the truck.
Gotcha.
And Frank inherited the truck.
Right.
And he didn't really want it either. He was a studio guy,
Right.
So it was a haphazard thing, and nobody was going out looking for business. They didn't have anybody doing, sales, or it was the stuff that came through the door. And then Frank had to figure out how to get it done, which is why he grabbed me. And then Frank took off. He went to work for Bob Ezrin up in Toronto.
Right.
Bob opened his own studio and dumped the truck in my lap. And and there's a certain amount of business coming in. Like I said, in '73, it was the organization was pretty lax. So we kind of grew that business out of necessity because it had to get organized, and it did gradually grow into a very big part of Record Plant's.
Yeah. Did you personally ever go back to the studio?
I didn't.
Really?
No, and it was a great fit for me because I have an attention span that measures in nanoseconds, and I don't have the patience for it. I wasn't good at doing endless guitar overdubs and a lot of the stuff that you had to do.
Right.
So it worked for me.
Yeah.
And
Well, it worked great because, how many years later do you come up with the new truck, Black Pete, right?
Well, I finally got them to finance that in 1979.
Right.
Because it was just, the old, it was dinky little 17-foot box, nice truck, nicely built.
Yeah.
A couple MM1000s that took up all the room.
Right.
A wonderful DiMedio console, but it had 24 inputs and 8 buses. And we had to modify it even to do 16 track. And now the 24 tracks are coming, and we got a stack of AM10 mixers and shit, and
Here's a naive question. How was everything powered?
you ran a bunch of heavy cable.
Into hopefully somewhere that had clean power?
Well, every theater
Right.
has got a big power station somewhere down in the basement, and we had to figure that one out too, because this thing had no isolation transformers when I got it.
The white truck.
The white truck.
Okay, gotcha.
It was just some cables with bare ends, and you go out and hook up to single phase.
Oh my God.
In the basement somewhere.
Sounds dangerous.
It was dangerous. It was endless ground loops.
Yeah.
Because something's always buzzing and shit's happening. It's terrible. It was a nightmare, and I didn't know anything about it either. Yeah, but we gradually, we had Paul Prestipino,
Sure.
Right.
who did.
He would come out on the gigs?
Reluctantly,
Right.
We would sometimes get him to come out, but we did gradually get a big isolation transformer, so you could divorce yourself from the grounds of the band. And Paul had built the mic transfer, the splitters, mic splitters, absolute necessity because you got to isolate yourself. Galvanically, and you got to get rid of that ground. You got to be able to lift the grounds, because otherwise you're everything's buzz.
Yeah.
And then the band is going to say "fuck you," and they're going to they're going to pull your cables.
Right.
So that was a real scramble to get that thing up to performance.
Wow.
Because it wasn't ready for prime time.
Wow.
And when television shit starts coming along, all of a sudden it's just not. It ain't just the record producer that's on your case.
Right.
It's the fact that they've got millions of dollars invested in a television program,
Yeah.
and if you fuck that up,
Yeah.
you're done.
Did you do any of the like midnight special stuff?
Yeah.
You did, because those things sound pretty amazing.
Yeah, some of those, and the ABC in concert.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Wolfman Jack.
Yeah, a bunch. Those were scary, man. Those were really scary because they didn't know what they were doing.
Right.
You know, the Vidiots had no idea about rock and roll and about sound reinforcement and live staging and all
I love the Vidiots.
So in those cases, for those TV shows, were you confined to using their microphones, or did you get a chance to set your own stuff up and they used yours?
Well, typically, what you did back then, there was touring PA companies.
Right.
They were nowhere near as sophisticated as they are now, and you're damn lucky if you got any kind of quality shit. But they always had to have PA. You're in the modern rock world now. You're in the early '70s. Shoko and Clair Brothers are starting to invent the touring PA companies, and PA companies were growing up, and so we would always go in and split, transformer split the tour mics, and then augment with with our own shit. We had our own stands and mics and stuff, and over the years you keep growing, because they kept getting bigger and bigger
Right.
and bigger.
But in the case of like vocals, you probably just had to use whatever they had up.
Yeah, for the most part,
Right.
they back in the really ancient prehistoric days, you see some of those old Beatles movies and shit like that where they've got a mic taped
Two of them, yeah.
together,
Right.
because they didn't have splitter transformers, and then the grounds are buzzing and people get electrocuted, and all kinds of fun. It took a lot of years for that stuff to grow up,
Right.
and become what it is today.
Right.
Was there ever a gig that didn't go so well?
Oh yeah, lots of those.
Yeah, it seems like
it's
you would
gotta
have
be,
to. Yeah,
right?
it would have to be.
Oh yeah.
It's super complicated, and it's like it's the reason why I just refused, like, never to do live sound, was because I really liked the fact that you had a control room meant you had control in a room, and like the live sound thing, a different venue, and ringing out the monitor, it's like that. And I tried it a couple of times. I sucked at it, and I was like, let the guys who are good at this do this shit.
Oh, it could be a
not
nightmare.
easy. Yeah.
There's
every night.
And of course, those were the days of recreational drugs, and and there was always alcohol. And you never knew what you were going to get.
Right.
It was crazy. That jumping back to that Watkins Glen show, that we talked about, which you guys had a presence at. We had the truck parked right beside the stage, and that was a pretty small truck, and it had the usual swing doors in the back. And I'm running the tape machines, these two big ass Ampex MM1000s, and that would generate a lot of paper, a lot of crap. You'd throw it in the trash, but on something that long, you're going to build up a lot of trash. You got to get rid of it. And it was, this is summer, and we're right beside this stage, and they've got they generate all that trash on stage, so they would throw it right down. Stage is 20 feet high, maybe something like that, 24, and so there's this mountain of black plastic trash bags, just a little bit beyond the truck. So I'm opening the door, and I'm going to throw out my contribution to the mess, and I look up on the stage, and this young hippie girl is walking. She's tripping. This is Grateful Dead. And she is obviously, just is completely tripping and waving and talking and everything. Walks right off of the stage, falls like 20 feet into all these black plastic trash bags, and I'm going, oh shit, and I jump off. And I run over and I kind of gently pull her out of there. She's fine, she's loose, and it's all bags of
garbage paper.
She just keeps talking, whatever hallucination she was on, and just walks right off, into the sunset. Okay. Grateful Dead.
Oh my God, that's amazing. The Watkins Glen story. I think Tony has a story about Watkins Glen, where maybe the band was going on and
he had to do so.
Yeah, he had to start doing sound for the band because the dude, the sound guy, couldn't make it to it was so packed it took him forever to get to the mixing area.
600,000 people.
Yeah. So that is like the biggest festival ever or something, or was to that date. I mean, it was
maybe.
It was clearly bigger than Woodstock.
Right.
Yeah.
But Woodstock had the movie, so it's a little more famous.
Hey,
yeah.
Did you ever do... that story reminded me of a C-Train recording in D.C.
I didn't.
You didn't.
It's entirely possible that it was done
was the truck.
Before... I got there in 73.
Okay.
And I think C-Train may have been slightly before that.
Because I believe Jay did it, right? So just recently I worked with him.
Jay Messina?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's I was doing something with him the other day, and the conductor for this orchestra turns out was a guy in C-Train, right?
Oh, cool.
So I tell Jay, or I tell this guy that Jay's, he goes, I know Jay Messina from... So, the story. So Jay, he goes, oh, C-Train, fuck. I go, what's the matter? He goes, well, I was doing this thing with the remote, and we went down to D.C., and it was like the middle of the winter or something, and C-Train started playing, and then a guy's banging on the door, this drunk guy, and they try to get rid of him, and the guy kept coming back, and so finally Jay threw him down the stairs, right? And they thought, okay, the guy was drunk, fuck it, get rid of him. They come back to the record plant to finish the record. Guy walks in, he's in the band.
Yeah, he was doing the scores, I think.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, Jay told me that story.
Jay. Oh God.
Yeah, a lot of great ones like that.
But I would imagine every night is a complete trip. I mean, it's different people. You're never with the same people. You're meeting different people every night. The level of competence is different every night.
Yeah, that reminds me of another quick one. We're up in Boston.
Yeah.
It was Edgar Witter and White Trash.
Yeah.
And we're doing a show at one of the Boston venues up there that's kind of in a pretty bad neighborhood. And I opened the door and went down to run into the theater to do something. And there's cops all over the place, and they got their guns out, and they turn on me because I burst open, and I'm going, whoa, we're just in here recording, and the guy says, okay, listen, he says, there's been a knifing, and the guy was seen running through this alley right past your truck, and he threw the weapon somewhere, so we're looking for the weapon, and I'm going, oh, okay, well, I'll just go back inside now, and. Truck is not bulletproof. Please don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you never knew.
You never knew.
Yeah.
But did you start to get into like doing award shows like the Oscars or Super Bowls and stuff like that?
Yeah, it kind of grew, along with television because TV started to see that there was interest in music and the live shows, and they could. They're out to make money,
right?
Get an audience, and they start televising the award shows, which they always did the big ones, like the Oscars,
right?
Black and white, this big,
right.
and real, iffy production and shit. But as it became more popular, they'd start adding, all of those kind of shows had an orchestra. And they started adding, they'd add music talent and everything. And, this stuff it grows organically.
Right.
Things get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you gotta be able to do it. And now you got to have a remote truck come in and do it because the television trucks were, they had a 12-input mixer.
Right.
When I saw that, as I took over the remote truck operation, I had to deal with the business end of it as well, and you got to keep the shit coming through the door. By now I got a kid or two.
Right.
You got to keep the turnstile going. So we do those. We used to do the Tonys in New York.
But that's got to be so nerve-wracking.
Oh, it's insane.
It's insane because there's so many different acts, different setups, and it's the pressure.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But we had, again, these things, they come in steps, and they have a life of their own. And in New York, I was very fortunate because Bob Lifton, who owned Regent in Philadelphia, so I had, even though he stayed in New York, but I worked for him indirectly, and we knew each other. He was a big TV guy. He had done, in addition to Regent Sound in New York, he always had worked in television and knew all the people. He was very good at it. Very, very smart guy. So he would hire us with the record plant truck when it outgrew the television truck. And Bob could multitask like that. That man was absolutely amazing. I remember the first time we did the Tonys, I had never had to deal with a script before. What's a script? Right. And Bob comes in with a goddamn book,
right?
That's got like 100 pages in it, and it's we're doing.
You got to make every cue.
And they're developing it as they rehearse it,
right?
And he's going, okay, page so and so, here comes 12 singers, and this there's a 5-piece band going to support them, and there's going to be this and that, and then somebody walks in the door and says, okay, scratch that, tear those pages out of the script, throw them away. Here's new pages,
right?
And it's like bam, 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 and I still remember the first time that Bob set us down at the end of the first day of rehearsal, and he says, okay, here's what we're doing. And he reads this stuff off at a machine gun pace. We're going to do this, and we're going to do that, we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, we're going to, and I'm going, that's impossible. How, you can't do that. And Bob just looks at me kind of funny and does it. And, making all those cues and, muting this stuff and change it. No automation. He's doing all this shit in real time. And doing the notes and listening to the PL, the director screaming out of the speaker and the AD, the assistant director is yelling something else. And there's, just the stage director. Now you've got a half a dozen people yelling at you in the PLs in the truck, which we never. You don't have that in the studio.
Oh, well,
right.
In John sessions, you do.
Yelling at myself.
Yeah. So that it's all these layers of chaos that you have.
And you're
to,
the feed to TV.
Yeah.
So you have to do all the cues. It's not like.
Well, yeah.
I can't imagine.
But so obviously you got really good at it. Did it ever get bulletproof?
No.
Like where you showed up and go, this is nothing to worry about?
No.
Right.
And in television, it gets even more complicated because they do have, the television truck audio stuff is growing at the same time we are.
Right.
And typically they are responsible for production.
Right.
Which is most of the vocals, all of the talking heads, all of the endless playbacks. Mm-hmm. There's guys in there that are playing those god awful cassette things that they used to have. Unreliable, shitty sounding stuff, cart machines.
Yeah.
And so all of that's going on, and then you've got the music cues. And typically there would be like a pit orchestra or a backstage orchestra, and then guest bands and all that kind of stuff. So very, very complicated stuff.
Can't imagine.
It really is complicated. I hope you charged for it.
Oh yeah.
Well, yes and no. Nobody's cheaper than a television producer.
Yeah.
They don't want to pay shit, and it's only audio.
Right.
It's not pictures.
Right.
It's just sound.
Yep.
Yeah. I find that interesting with now movies, because movies, like you think record budgets are really low. Movie budgets are super high. Yeah. They're so fucking cheap.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like crazy.
Well, early on, somebody told me, he said, you know why movie budgets are $10 million? Which, today they're hundreds.
Yeah.
This is back in the day. And I said, no. And he says, well, if you have a $5 million budget, they're going to notice if you steal $1 million. If you've got a $10 million budget, they're not going to notice.
Now, if you have a $100 million budget,
there you go.
We're in the wrong business, buddy.
So, at what point did it not become the record plant Chunk when Roy left New York?
Well, all of these things have a life of their own, right. The way they go. And as I grew the business and convinced them to invest in the black truck, at one point when I was desperate to get this truck built, which I had even tried to do on my own, as my own business, and couldn't finance it, and I came in with a business plan and presented it to Abe and Roy and so on, and just, and hammered on them. And Paul Sloman came to my defense at the time and said, look, you got to do this. If you want to stay in this business, you got to do this because, competition is coming.
Right.
This shit's obsolete, da-da-da. And they finally agreed to do it. So I fought with them for a few years. But eventually, it just got to the point where we agreed to disagree. Right. I said, look, I'll produce this stuff. I'll hire the truck for the stuff I'm doing. I'll stay with you. I'll friendly divorce.
Right.
But they were not doing what they needed to do.
Yeah. Right. What year was that? 84-ish or 86-ish?
No, this is up in, I left in late 86, 87.
88 was when they closed, right, or no?
Yeah, well, 89 was the final year.
Okay.
That was the year that it went under. And, by then I had founded remote recording services,
right.
And I hired trucks all over the place depending on what was due. And a lot of it, I'd hire the record plant truck anytime I could.
Right.
So Kusta took that truck?
No, I bought before they went under. Actually on the very last day of 1988, I had struck a deal with Roy to buy the black truck.
Oh, okay.
And the very next day, the lawyers turned up because Record Plant was going into bankruptcy.
Oh, shit.
Right.
So they knew.
Right.
And that's the only reason that I tried to make that deal for years before, and we could never arrive at a
number.
At a number. Yeah. So we did. I took the black truck, and they went bankrupt about a year later. Kuster won the bid for the white truck.
Right.
And at the end of the day, he also bought the rights to the name Record Plant Remote.
Right.
So he went that way,
right.
And I was already off. We've been friends,
right,
all the way, to the end. We were,
yeah.
He was very, very good friend. I loved him dearly.
Yeah, we miss him.
Yeah,
he taught me so much on that fucking truck. Just, I I did not see you at Kuster's memorial, but that was, that was a tough, just a whole thing. I heard towards the end he wasn't feeling well, and you obviously were super closer to him. But what a great guy, and totally missed. And the fact that so many people came from so many places.
Wasn't that amazing?
Yeah. People from L.A., people from the South. Like, I rolled in with Bill Whitman, and literally I was stunned at how many people were there to pay their respects. And
what really was telling is there was a lot of the video people, production people,
right.
Some business people.
Yeah.
Kuster got along with everybody.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm here to tell you, some of those people were pretty nasty people.
Right.
Pretty hardcore.
Right.
It's all about me.
Yeah,
it's all about money.
Right.
Those kind of people.
Yeah.
And yet Kuster, they loved.
Yeah.
They didn't love me so much.
Well, that's okay.
Right.
Exactly.
How can we communicate that on a podcast? A little bit of a.
We'll dedicate this episode to him, his
Kuster.
memory of
Absolutely.
all the good shit he did for everybody.
Yes.
So,
And,
Was he your assistant on the truck?
Yeah, he came. One of the great things about Record Plant and about Roy and Che and all those guys, they took people in and trained them as engineers. They already had these aces. They had Jay Masita and Shelley Yakis and Roy Scala himself, who were absolutely brilliant. But they wanted to train engineers the way they wanted to run things. So people would come in, and if you survived as an assistant and worked your way up, like Tom Panunzio, so on, you became one. And all of that worked, but sometimes success spoils you. Record Plant made a lot of money.
right.
But things kind of drifted with that success, and they didn't reinvest.
Right.
You had the Hit Factory debacle, which we won't go into that. All these other studios that were rearming and buying SSLs,
And the power station started and
exactly
became a real thing.
all the competition, and they did not reinvest. They did a little too late. They put the Trident in the mixer room, but it was too late.
Right.
Yeah.
And Roy was in Rio.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And
A lot. He was in Rio a lot.
And it just gradually got away from him.
Yeah.
And that you can't make that up.
Right.
When you let it go for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
But do you not still have the remote, the business that you had from that point? Are you not part of that anymore?
No, that's the Cliff's Notes on that is that in 1989, I had already moved the black truck out to Pennsylvania where I lived. Based it out there, and we did a lot of work for Sony, Columbia Records still at the time. They wanted to do a live remote. And they wanted to do it digitally with their 3324s, the first of those kind of things. And Columbia was a great client. I agreed to do, just bare bones stuff. So Phil and I are just going to jump in the truck, not charge him a travel day, drive on up. It's January. It's starting to snow. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. Phil's driving, and I couldn't drive this big trucks, and we're coming over this downhill stretch in Pennsylvania. It's one of those high crowned country roads. There's a lake over here, which means that there's moisture on the road, and it freezes, and it's black ice.
Oh, jeez.
And we come up over this crest, and there's a car that's spinning down there on the road and just, going very slow. And I don't remember any of this shit because I was knocked unconscious.
Please.
Phil's got to try and find a way to not kill these people with this giant Peterbilt. And, the truck starts doing this kind of thing, and it, and he loses it. It rolled.
Right.
It went sideways, and then when you get that kind of momentum with tires, it rolls.
Right.
And my seatbelt popped, and I went flying. And relatively low speed is the only thing that saved us. I got, like I say, I was knocked unconscious, and they pull me out. And, the medics strap you down because they don't know if you've broken your back or anything like that. And I'm going, where the fuck am I? What happened? You get cold cocked like that and you go into shock.
Yeah.
And I didn't know where I was. I didn't know and I'm going. And as I start to become conscious, and they're taking me to the hospital, and I'm going, oh shit, we're supposed to be driving to New York to do this gig at the Algonquin Hotel, with this, and this is pre-cell phone days, right? So I get to the ER, and I grab, still on the gurney, all strapped down, and I grab this, this young intern, and I say, look, man, you have to do this for me. Here is the number. You call my wife. You don't tell her what happened. You just tell her to call a guy named Kuster. At this, she'll have the number. Call him. Get his ass over to cover our gig. That's all you got to tell her. Don't tell her what happened. Just tell her to do that. And the guy goes, fortunately, he didn't blow me off. He actually went in and made the phone call, got Dusty out of bed. She calls Kuster. He goes and gets the old white truck and goes and covers the gig. Right? We just, our truck is destroyed. We're both completely fucked up. So.
Did everything in the truck just like fall? So the gear? We had taken off, we took the analog 24s out because they were going to provide their own 3324s. Right. So that saved, because those machines, they were expensive.
While they are strapped in, with cargo straps, and it's relatively secure, but when you start flipping shit like that, good luck.
So the console was totally trashed?
No. Actually, the only thing, it's kind of like picking up the truck and dropping it on the side. And those trucks are not, that was a very, very well-built, totally custom truck that was very, very reinforced. But
it was built for you.
Yeah.
Wow.
I designed it, and Black Body built it, and it was lead-lined. It had all this great shit. But it's still like picking a house up and dropping it on its side because it goes parallel walls. Everything breaks. And so all the shit that's attached to your wall, it's like picking up your house and dropping it in a hurricane. So, most of the stuff stayed because it was built that way, but the box itself was destroyed. The insurance adjuster came around, and you know what happens usually with that? Well, you're not covered for that, But this guy was a retired physics teacher that was doing work for the insurance companies because they sent him on the tough gigs, the things that had some kind of science attached to them.
Right.
And thank Thor, this guy, after I showed him all this shit, explained everything to him, and after all, we went over the whole thing with him, and he saved my ass. He totaled that console. And then I was able to buy it back for dimes on the dollar,
right,
and take it down to API. They took all the 560s. They built me a new console, and we sold the other one. They rebuilt that one and sold that. That went on to have a life all over the place, coast to coast. And it now resides in Nashville at the House of Blues.
Oh, wow.
In that studio. That console.
The old console.
Yeah, the black truck console.
Wow.
That was an API?
Yep. Custom API.
Right.
That was a beautiful console.
Yeah.
I love that console.
Still working.
That's amazing.
So, John, you would, as an intern, you would be assigned to
Tape
the
librarian.
truck?
I'll tell you a very funny Dave Hewitt story.
Yeah.
Okay? This is now me as a tape librarian. Now, you probably don't remember this, but I'll never forget it. My first assisting session with Roy in the mix room was a complete disaster. I unpatched a bunch of shit I didn't realize I was supposed to. A neat freak, I unplugged stuff, and he apparently was preset from the day before. So within a half an hour, he picks up the phone and he talks to Lila and he says, "Get this idiot out of here.
Oh, no.
Get me Steve Mark Antonio." My first shot at assisting.
All three of them?
All three of them. Steve, Mark, Antonio. I sheepishly walk back to the tape library. I'm sitting in the tape library looking out the window, practically crying because I think I'm donezo, right? I think I am now going to get fired and that's it, because the owner just called me an idiot and had me kicked out of the room. David Hewitt walks in looking for something, a tape or something, and I'm sitting there, and you're like, "What's the matter?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, I can't believe Roy." He's like, "You'll be fine." You just walked out, and I was like, "Okay, maybe I won't get fired."
Good man.
So anyway, but that I'll never forget that, David. You were the first person who saw me. I was literally having a nervous breakdown, and you were just like, relax. Relax, kid.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, they would do to train us is I would be a tape librarian, and then I'd get my shot in the shop for a week. And they'd show us how to align tape machines. And I would do the walkthrough every morning with a shop person, whether it was Presto, Michael Guthrie, my brother, whoever. And I would sit there, and I would help them align the machines. And then you would do something else. You know, you would do like if there was a problem in Studio B, you would go in and help them, you know, do that. But then they also put you on the truck so you could learn remote recording. They also put you in the cutting room with Joe Brescio.
Yeah.
So you learned how to cut, you know. They gave you basic knowledge on all these aspects.
Amazing.
The dupe room.
What?
The dupe room.
The dupe room,
Studio
of course.
D.
I was the king of the copy room for like a week. Yeah, I just sat there. And that was also part of, you know, the training of just, you know, running cassettes or whatever.
Because you had to listen to it. You know, you weren't just doing dumb work.
Right.
You were responsible
For the cassette, right? Because those cassettes were going to like Columbia Records, or you know what I mean. That was serious business. Like if Jack Douglas needed a copy of an Aerosmith mix to get the A&R guy, if you gave it to him and it was a dropout, you were fucked.
Right.
You know what I mean? So anyway, there was a lot of
I
responsibility.
thought you were a dropout.
I'm a drop off. Listen, we'll talk about
And
that
drop
later.
off.
But no, that was what was great about what you were talking about the hierarchy of.
Yeah.
And then, you know, as you made it up the ladder from tape librarian, and then you became an assistant, like Steve Marcantonio, back to him. He trained me as an assistant, and because when he became an engineer, I was his assistant. I didn't know, you know, he learned engineering and I learned assisting. We did it together with, you know, like weekend freebie sessions and stuff like that. It was really it was actually a magical place. That's why
It sure was.
Tuesday night when I was walking through Hell's Kitchen, which by the way is not so Hell's Kitchen-y anymore.
Yeah.
It's really not. Like, it's very mild out there. I found myself walking down 44th, and I looked at 321, and I was just like, holy fuck, this is like weird. And I had to take the dumb selfie with me in front, but it was like I got like kind of chills. And then I came around the corner, and there was Smith's. Remember the bar?
Yeah.
That's still there.
Still there.
Yeah.
I know. And I took a picture and sent it to Steve Mark. I was just like...
Where did you park the truck at the record plant?
We used to, initially back in the day, we used to park it across the street at one of those parking lot
Right.
things. And they gradually they kept growing, you know, as the population of New York kept going. And pretty soon they said, nah, you know, we don't want you guys here anymore. And we would park it right there on the street, 44th and 8th, and run power cables into what became the truck shop right there. And they hated us.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, UPI, wasn't it? The news agency? That's where they used to park.
Oh, yeah.
And they had plates that said, you know, NYP, you can park here. And we're in their space, you know, with one or two trucks, and they're fucking livid.
Yeah.
And you know, we're just sort of, it's a truck.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Is there any part of the gig that you miss?
I miss the era. You know, the work, you know, changed so dramatically over the years, and it's not just that it became an untenable business proposition. You can't make any money at it.
Right.
But the music changed, everything changed, and to me, I tend to think in eras, and I've been through. I grew up Air Force. You know, I grew up with airplanes. I flew.
Oh, really?
You know, I went through the end of the propeller era into the jet era. We moved to Europe. I was there at the golden era of the sports cars. You know, the Ferraris, all that kind of got involved in that shit. Came back to the States. We're a golden era of music and all this remote shit. But that was an era,
Right.
you know, and it gradually turned into what we have now. For better or for worse. And, you know, there's plenty of people making livings at it and making it all work. I couldn't do it. It was time for me to walk away.
Yeah.
When you go upstairs, do you have any interest in what the booths or?
I just come here to annoy you guys.
Yeah, good.
yeah.
You know,
Mission accomplished.
lots. You know, there's so many great people in this business that are.
Have you run into a million people?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Are you going to be at the record plant thing tomorrow night?
Oh yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that's that's really the prime
Right.
mover, and that was, as we're talking about here, that was such a special era and a special place.
Yeah.
And it attracted, so many people that even all these years later,
Yeah.
they still, we will go over to that Irish bar, and there will be, 100, 200 people that were, and this, what was it, 30 years ago now?
Yeah.
That it went away, but all of these people
Yeah, 30 years ago.
that lived through that experience.
Oh, yeah. But also you had, the crew was fantastic. I mean, Kuster, Phil, and you. And then if Presto was on the truck, I mean, that is such a solid, that's a
motley crew, actually.
On a certain level, yes, but at the same time, it's like this talent level, like infinity.
Well, look, that's my point about how it just sounds easy. You pull up with the truck. Oh, yeah, you were going to record something. They'll sing some songs. So many elements could go wrong.
Yeah, it's difficult shit. But,
Yeah.
You get, you learn how to do it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, and there's an amazing number, both in the live sound and in the production, television, and especially in these remote things. There's a lot of ex-military guys.
Really?
In that. Because it's, there is a bit of an addiction to that kind of work,
energy,
to that kind of stress,
Yeah.
and that kind of, it's a mission.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And to me, having kind of grown up with that in my Air Force family, and I'm a vet, I was in the Air Guard, and the whole race car thing, you're doing sort of the same thing. You prep these race cars and you take them out and you try to kill people with them, and all that kind of shit. That's exactly what the remotes are.
Yeah.
And for me, that it gave me a sense of mission.
Right.
Yeah. When were you in the Air Force? No.
Well, to be honest, I was in the Air National Guard. These are the guys that go out and do stuff like when the hurricanes hit and that kind of shit.
Right.
And we were flying 4-engine prop planes, the old Connie Super Constellations, which is a beautiful aircraft. That was like the epitome of the 4-engine prop plane of the day. So I felt a real kinship to that kind of thing as it morphed into jets.
Right.
And I went through all that. I saw all those growing up, all those jets, all the fighters, bombers. Dad ended up flying C-141s, Vietnam, all that kind of shit. And that was kind of like the analog to digital routine. And then it was kind of the same thing in the sports cars. We're in Europe. We're watching the golden age of the factory-sponsored gentleman racer, the Ferrari GTOs, the Porsche Carreras, all this stuff. Right. And there's no STP stickers on them. No. These are these beautiful, beautiful cars that were hand-designed. There was not a fucking computer that ever touched that stuff. Right. It was a slide rule. And I watched that go. When I came back to the States, I went to work in that field. I bootstrapped myself up to working for Roger Penske in Philadelphia when he had married his first Chevrolet agency. Talk about a business genius.
Amazing.
And I went to Watkins Glen. I finally got onto the pit crew as a the last guy in the gopher. He had his. Those were in the Can-Am race days. I don't know if you guys paid attention. These were the big-ass, fire-breathing V8 powered. They stuff a big V8 in the European sports racers. Unbelievable machines. And Roger had just moved his way all the way up the chain he's now multi-billionaire. He owns more car
Penske's,
agencies than anybody on earth. He's won the Indy 500 60 times.
Right.
Yeah.
But back then, he was still in the road racing thing. He was championship driver himself. And he's got the Lola T70, and he's got a big 427 illegal Chevy factory thing that they claim they never made. And I'm on that pit crew at Watkins Glen. And unfortunately, there's a big uphill grade at the Glen, just outside of the pits, and it's blind. And these cars are going through there. These things have got 600 horsepower V8s, and they're just blindingly fast.
Right.
They got no safety anything.
Yes.
This is 1966, and up over that grade, a Porsche 904 had spun.
Oh, jeez.
And then you remember Haas Cartwright from the?
Oh yeah, sure. Dan Blocker.
Sam Blocker. He had a Can-Am car. It was called the Vinegaroon. And that guy comes up over the rise.
Oof.
The Porsche's right there. He T-bones it. And then Penske's car, Mark Donahue, one of the greatest drivers ever, comes blazing up over the hill, full of wreckage. It's a narrow racetrack. He's got to go to the ditch. They had evacuation ditches. And I saw some film of this thing later. And it's bouncing. He hits the ditch, and it's going, it's the car, the momentum will keep it in the ditch,
right.
But it's going all over the goddamn place. He pops the five-way race belt and kind of pole vaults himself out of the car. And about the time that he hits the ground, the fuel tank bursts, because that was before fuel cell days. Whole fucking car goes up in flame. And we're down there in the pits. I'm actually standing beside Donahue's wife, who's got the clocks. And they're looking, they're seeing the smoke cloud come up over the thing, and they're counting the cars coming around, and she's got the watch, so she knows it's Mark, and everybody starts running for it. And fortunately, he got out of that
So he survived
without a scratch.
Yeah.
Car's total.
Did you ever drive?
I did some racing in Europe as a kid, but it became real apparent that I was never going to be fast.
Right.
It's just like when I tried to learn how to play the guitar. Never.
Yeah.
It's so. You do what you go to your strengths.
Yeah. No, I did bumper cars at the State Fair in North Carolina on Saturday.
How'd you do?
I was pretty good. I knocked the shit out of some grandma. It was really great. Oh boy, that's crazy. Well, anything else? Did we miss anything? Do you want to?
Well, I'll give you a quick coda to that story.
Yeah. Okay.
There went my chance. To be on the pit crew with the big guys, and that car wasn't going anywhere, and I couldn't afford to live in Philadelphia because I was commuting from all. I was going broke. I took a gig back over in Jersey where I was living with my parents, working on Jags and Aston, all that kind of regular cars. Mm-hmm. But I could make a living, and I could afford to have an apartment. And then I met this folk singer, and it took a little while, but she introduced me to the recording studio.
Right. Wow.
Who was the singer?
Well, there were a couple of them. There was a girl named Terry Shore, who was a wonderful singer and songwriter, and a wonderful singer named Sherry Hill, who actually had a fairly substantial career and had label deals. She was a great songwriter. We did a bunch of stuff for Gamble and Huff, Philadelphia. Wrote a lot of hit records. And she was the one that took me to Regent Sound.
Oh wow!
When she was doing a demo.
Do you think that part of your training, knowing about airplanes and cars, that you had a little bit of a head start understanding how technology worked?
Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah. It's all it's all mechanics. It's all physics.
Yeah.
It's all and the military training is all
I'm sure
about
that was so
mission.
crucial. Right. The mission thing sounds so crucial, right? Don't you think?
cooperation, having a team, having discipline.
Yeah.
Can you imagine me and you on a remote truck?
Yeah.
It'd be a fucking nightmare.
Fucking.
We'd be like, fuck this. We're leaving Buffalo, going back to the bar in New York City. like that mission would be aborted like immediately.
Oy vey.
All right. Well, thank you, David.
Dave.
Really great.
My pleasure.
Yay. Me and Stewie want to thank all you gear clubbers for listening to this crazy podcast we do. If you can, leave a review on iTunes. It really makes a difference. And don't be shy. We love hearing from you guys on the social media at Gear Club Podcast. Don't forget to go to gearclubpodcast.com for Spotify playlists, links and photos for the episodes, and my favorite hot sauce of the month.